Hello class. So welcome back to the second part of our Load Runner class. So in the last class, on the last video, I showed you guys how to use Load Runner VUGen. And I said VUGen is used to record our script for one user. So now that we have a working script for one user, how do we use it further? So we have to use another tool called Load Runner Controller. Now controller is where we define the characteristics of the test we want to run. And this here is one of the most important part of the tool, because if you do this wrongly, your result will come out wrongly. Okay, so let's get going and I'll show you how to use controller. So from your VUGen, I will use the transaction script. Let me just run it one more time to make sure everything is fine. So I'll do a playback. So my playback passed. So in this script, I have two different transactions. So I have one transaction for login and I have another transaction for logout. So I'll use this for the controller. So now to open up the controller, what you do is from your VUGen, all you have to do is go into, where is it? I think that actually you can just go into your HP software, all programs, HP software, HP load runner, and you click on the controller. So it's a green one. So I'll click on controller. Alright, so the first thing you're going to see once it opens up is asking you to select a scenario type. Don't think too much about this for now, but the difference is this. The first one is what we call a manual scenario. And this is basically telling load runner that you will specify the number of virtual users you would like to to use to run the test. And essentially we use manual when we have no goal in mind, meaning I don't know how many users I need per se. I don't know how long this test is going to run for, but I'm just going to keep trying a few different things and I'll measure my results. That's manual. Goal oriented is you have a goal and you're working backwards from that goal. So for example, we know we need only 5,000 users. That's a goal. Or my response time should not be more than 5 seconds. That's a goal. So load runner knows that once you go past 5 seconds for your measurement, just fail the test. Fail it. There's no point to keep going. So that's a goal-oriented scenario, because load runner knows your goal, and whenever you reach your goal, it stops the test. But most of the time, you're probably going to be using manual. Okay, so now the next part is asking me for my VUGen script. So it's a load runner script. It is asking me to find it from here. So I believe I called it Thursday transaction. So once you have it, you can just add it to the bunch. Now, because it's performance testing, I can actually run more than one script at a time. But we'll keep it simple for now. I'll just say run the Thursday transaction. Open up my VUGen, make sure it's the right name. Yep, it is the right name. Okay, and I'll press OK. So in controller, a couple of things you have to be aware of. The first thing is your load. Everyone knows load. Load is your number of virtual users. And I can't spell anymore. Alright, so let's set our load. So how do you define your load? You can see in here that there will be something called virtual users. So you click in there, and by default they will give you 10 users by default. I want to actually run 50 users because that's the maximum for load runner for the free version. So we need 40 more users. To add 40 more, I'll click on this button, add VU users. And it's asking me how many more do you want to add. So I'll say 40. That's the name of my script, and I'll press OK. So right away you can see that 40 more users got added. So my total now should be 50 users. So that's my load. So once you've done this, you can just close, and you have 50 users. Okay, that's the first thing. The next thing we try to set in a load runner test is how do you want your users to come alive? So we call that initializing your users. What does that mean? There are different ways you can actually bring your users to life. You can bring them on simultaneously, meaning they all come up together, or you can initialize your users maybe every 2 seconds, every 5 seconds. The key thing here is whatever you do here, guys, it has to be realistic to the requirement. For example, Facebook. Facebook wants to measure how long will it take, 1,000 users to upload a picture. Now the question you're going to ask the business person is, how do your users come on board? Do the 5,000 users all sign into Facebook at the same time? Or do they come on board every 5 seconds? If they all come on board at the same time, then you click on simultaneous. If it's every 2 seconds or every 3 seconds, then you can come in here and say add one user every 2 seconds. I'll keep it simple because of time. I would say bring all the users, all the 50 users at the same time. So you press OK and you know OK. So that's how we initialize all the users. Now the next one is also the same thing, which is start. You want to start the users. I would say start all my 50 users at the same time. Some people might say bring one user on board every 2 seconds. It doesn't matter. But I think these two have to match. Whatever you set to your initialization must also be the same in your start users. So I would say simultaneous, press OK. And if you notice, my graph has changed, meaning now all the 50 users would all start at the same time. The next thing is what we call duration. So duration. So we've talked about load. We've talked about how you want your load to be initialized. I can't spell. I knew that. Initialized. The next thing is your duration. In duration, you have to be very careful here as well. If you're running, a test, maybe for 5 minutes, that's your duration. If you're running a test for 10 minutes, that's your duration. If you're running a stress test, those kind of tests tend to be longer, meaning you have a higher number of load and your duration is longer. That's a stress test. If you're running an endurance test, this is basically the same load, right? Meaning there's no higher number of load. It's the same number of load, but your duration is really, really long. We're talking about, hours. It could be 5 hours, 3 hours. It could even be days. So that's the difference between stress test and endurance test. Now, let's go back into controller. Because of time, you guys will probably be bored if I run this for 5 days. So my duration would only be for 2 minutes. So I'll say run for 2 minutes. So 02, and I'll press OK, and my graph will change as well. As you can see, the graph is now 50 to start with. Go for 2 minutes. Okay. Then lastly, how do I want to end my test? Everything is all based on the user's behavior, because the user's behavior determines the test results. If your users all log off at the same time, then we can say stop simultaneously. If they log off every 1 or 2 seconds, then you can also define that as well. So in this case, because of time, I would say log everybody off at the same time. So now I have a block. 50 starts, 50 run for 2 minutes, and 50 drops off after 2 minutes. So this is how you define your test. It doesn't matter what kind of test you're doing the same type of definition. So once you're happy with your definition, you can just start running. So to run the test, I will push this button here, and that will start running my test. So it's asking me where to save the results. Just press yes, and my test has started running. So once it's running, you can see several things will be happening in here. It's showing me how many users the test is running. It's showing me how long the test is running for so far, how many hits per second. I'm going to explain this later on to you. How many transactions have passed. So there are 2 transactions, if you remember, that I'm running. So far, 50 have passed. There are no failures so far, and there are no errors so far. What you want to look out for, guys, is your failed transaction and your errors. The more you have errors, it's telling you the server could not respond to a request. That could mean many things for the users. It could mean the user just sat there waiting for the browser to return, and the browser never returns. It could mean the service is so slow, right? But failures and errors, they're actually what you're looking out for in your performance test. So we have some graphs in here, but don't worry about that. I would explain that in the next video. So I'm just going to wait for the test to be done before we move on to the next topic. All right, so I believe the test is done, and we have 400 past transactions. It ran for 3 minutes, 9 seconds, and you guys might be asking, we only said run for 2 minutes. Why did it go longer? That's because sometimes it takes time for the number of users to actually log off. But we have 400 transactions, and everything passed. There was no error, and there was no failed transaction. So this tells me that the performance test we did was not stressful. It wasn't stressful because everything passed. But this is how you do, a very simple. This is how you set up your performance test. Now, the most exciting one is your results. So in the next video, I will show you how to measure the results of your test. So that's the end of this video.